All right, in this lesson, we're going to combine two paintings to make a collage image. Adobe Photoshop is often used for editing images and combining multiple images into one. To make our collage, we'll explore two key concepts in Adobe Photoshop: layers and selections. While going through this lesson, we'll also review how to open, save, and close Photoshop documents. So Adobe Photoshop is a raster editing program. That is, it's a program that works with images that are made up of individual pixels or a bitmap, or kind of like what you'd think of as like a photograph, or most of the images we interact with on any given day. There's other programs out there from Adobe, like Adobe Illustrator, which is their vector editor, or Adobe Premiere, which is their video editor. These lessons are mostly going to focus on Adobe Photoshop. Now, when you first open up Photoshop, you'll be greeted with this kind of home screen. At any point when you're in Photoshop, you can always return to this screen by coming up to the top and clicking on the home button when you're in your workspace, or you can switch to your workspace by clicking on that little PS. In the home screen, up here in the top right, we have your cloud sync status for anything that's saved to the cloud or other things like that. So like if you're working as part of a creative team, you'll care a lot about this. As an individual, unless you're using their cloud storage, you won't really care about this. We have a search feature for their help. We're not going to use it, but it's there. Their help actually is pretty good. So don't be afraid to go ahead and search that area. And then we have a way to access your own Adobe Creative Cloud account. By default right here will be anything that you've recently opened up, which is your default home screen. You can also, when you're first getting started, switch to the Learn layout, which has a bunch of very short basic tutorials for learning Photoshop. If any of these seem interesting to you, go do them. They're actually surprisingly good. Adobe recognizes that their software is actually pretty hard to learn and use, so they have a pretty good learning system set up. Also over here on the left, we have some cloud stuff. So like your files saved to the cloud, stuff that's been shared with you. If you're using Adobe Lightroom, you'll be able to access your Lightroom stuff, and then anything recently deleted. Importantly for us, we have our new file and open file button. And then across the top, we also have our menu bar to access certain menu features such as open and new as well. So in Photoshop, there's going to be a bunch of hotkeys, and then there's also going to be a bunch of buttons. And honestly, whichever way is lazier or easier for you is the one you should do. A person who's good at Photoshop will find the laziest method that will give them good results. So like, for example, we're going to open an image. We could go to File, Open. We could click on the Open button. Since I'm on Apple, I would hit Command O, or if you're on Windows, Control O. I could drag the file into Photoshop. I could drag the file over the Photoshop icon, and that would also open the image. Whichever one of those works for you is the method that you should use. I like hotkeys, so I'm just going to hit Command O, and I'll navigate to my files. Your files will look a little bit differently than yours. When you first open up the file, you'll actually go to wherever you have like a zip file. It'll look like something like this. And you'll need to unpack that zip file from Finder or Windows Explorer before you'll be able to access your lesson files. So make sure that you open that up first in Finder or File Explorer. In my case, I'm just going to go to where I have my stuff saved from producing this textbook. And we're going to grab Chapter 1, De Croix Yawning, and click Open. If the first time it opens, by the way, I've asked you something about the Creative Cloud, choose on your computer. They're really kind of pushing the Creative Cloud storage thing, and it's just not useful for most people. Let's establish some quick vocabulary about our workspace. So over here on the left is going to be our toolbar. Up right above our toolbar is our home button. Next to our home button is a series of controls for our tools. So this is going to be our tool option bar. And notice as I change what tool I have active, my tool option bar will also change. This kind of empty space right here is going to be our workspace. Workspace can be a little bit confusing because we also have our workspace button up here in the top right, which allows us to access individual layouts for panels and tools and stuff in Photoshop. Again, all this is really going to do is going to kind of change, maybe add a little bit of functionality. We also have some random buttons up here we're mostly not going to care about, like ways to get stuff out of here, notifications, search, other types of help. Over here on the right, we have our panels. Our panels are going to be additional ways of interacting with our tools or our canvas. Our canvas is going to be whatever image we have open up on our workspace. Now, a little bit confusingly, canvases are a little bit different than something we call an artboard. So we can have multiple artboards in one workspace, but we can only have one canvas in our workspace. If you move on to stuff like Adobe Illustrator, you'll be using artboards instead of canvases, and you'll be able to have many designs within one workspace. Down here towards the bottom, we have this little guy right here, which I can click and move around, and I can click these little dudes right here and tell it to go away. And what that is my contextual taskbar. And my contextual taskbar is something that was added recently that will look at whatever you're doing, and Photoshop is going to guess what you want to do, and it will make it a button or some other kind of quick thing in that bar. If yours ever disappears, you will want to go to Window and bring back the contextual taskbar. Now, problems that I'll sometimes see happen with students who are first getting started in Photoshop is that they will lose their document. So like it'll be super tiny, and then it'll be way off to the side, and they have no idea where it is. So if you hit Command or Control 0, that will fit everything back onto your screen, including if you're zoomed in. Command 0 fits it back on your screen. I can also access my zoom by clicking down here in the bottom left and typing it in. Another thing that frequently happens is this, where, I have that little area active, there we go. Your workspace disappears. Now, if your workspace disappears, you've accidentally hidden it, and you can bring it back by hitting the Tab key. Finally, you have the pseudo nuclear option where, like, if this is all really messed up, like your panels are just everywhere and you have no idea what's going on, you can come up to the top right and pick Reset, in this case Essentials, but whatever workspace you happen to be in, and that will bring it back to the default. Finally, if like Photoshop is crashing a lot or is just not working, you'll close the program and you'll hold down a series of hotkeys. On Apple, it's going to be Command Option Shift, and then click and hold on hold that down while clicking on the program to start it, and it'll ask you to delete your preferences. Delete your preferences. On Windows, it is Command Alt Shift. And that will delete any preferences, because preferences will corrupt sometimes, and that will make Photoshop not behave correctly, and everything will kind of keep crashing. So if you have those problems, those are the quick and easy solutions before you wander off onto Reddit and get kind of grumpy about how ineffectual it can be to find certain stuff. Two other things we want to cover before we start actually doing things. These little boxes right here represent my foreground and background colors. So like whatever color I have active for a tool will appear in these little guys. I can always reset it by clicking the tiny ones. We've got a default of black and white. And then we also, just like in a web browser, have tabs. So like I can drag out this window to its own tab. I can drag it back up and put in a new tab. And if I had multiple documents open, so like if I go and open up the demo, we can see that it appears as a tab, again, just like in Firefox or Chrome or whatever, and it will behave just like that. Okay, so looking at our figure, what we want to do with this is we want to remove his background, replace it with a new one, and then add text to it. And just like what we can see down here at the bottom, the contextual taskbar has given us some pretty quick startups right for it. So in our case, if we try like remove background, we can see that it removes his head too. So I need to undo this. So if you ever have to undo a step, it's Command Z or Control Z, or you can come up to Edit, Undo to undo that. So if the remove background didn't work, let's move down in steps and complexity. So I'm going to start with now select subject. And we can see that we have our first kind of key concept, which are these little marching ants, which we call a selection. So a selection is a way of me saying I want to work with just part of an image. So like if I had a brush active and I was painting, I can only brush in my selection. Now, when we look at our selection, we can see that the head is missing from it, which we could kind of figure out that would happen when we used remove background, and it didn't keep the head. So we need to add to this selection. To add to our selection, I'm going to come over to the left, and I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4 tools down. It looks like a box with a cursor over it. If I mouse over it, I see it's the Object Select tool. And I don't actually want the Object Select tool, but I want something kind of like it. So if I click and hold on this tool, we can see that there's actually 3 tools nested right there. Now I know that there's tools nested there because there is a tiny little caret in the bottom of that tool telling me that there are more tools there. So in our case, I'm going to pick up Quick Select. It dropped my selections. I'm going to back up. There we go. And it should default to add selection, but make sure it's got this little guy marked up here in your tool option bar. And you should just be able to paint over pretty quickly our yawning figure's head right here to add it to the selection. You can see we've got a little line missing right there. Please hop in there, thank you. By the way, when you're looking at this, if my mouse is much larger than yours, it's because I've enlarged it, so it's easier to see in videos, especially for people accessing this from their phones. So I now have added his head to the selection, and I want to do another kind of key concept thing from Photoshop, which is rather than delete, like I could just delete this, but I want to hide it instead. And I'm going to hide it using something called a layer mask. I can access layer masks by clicking in my contextual taskbar, this box with a circle in it, or coming down over here and clicking this box with a circle in it as well. And what that will do is it will be like, oh, you want to work with the figure, you don't want to work with anything else. So when you click the layer mask button, it will hide everything that wasn't in your selection. And we can see that that layer mask has been turned into a black and white image over here in our layers panel. In later lessons, we'll take a much closer look over what this means. But for today, this works out just perfectly for us. Now, in order to make a composite, so a combination of images that is realistic, we need to add an image to our canvas. So kind of just like with Open, there's a million ways to do it. Let's keep it simple for today. And I'm going to come up to File, and I'm just going to go to Placed in Bed. From Placed in Bed, I'll navigate to where I have my image, in this case, Chapter 1, Cole Thomas, Destruction of Empires. I'll click Place. And when it comes in, we can see that it fit the width, but I want to fit it up and down rather than just side to side. So I can click and drag on these little control points, and that will allow me to change the size. I could also rotate it or all other sorts of fancy stuff, but in our case, we're just going to mouse over this center control point and drag up, and it should kind of magnetically snap to this top edge. And I can see that it's snapping because I get these little awesome kind of magenta lines. If yours is not getting those magenta lines, come up to View and turn on Snap. Similarly, later when you're working in Photoshop, if you don't want stuff to magnetically snap to edges or other kinds of set distances, you'll turn Snap on and off. Next, I'll click and drag on the bottom control point and let it snap into place. I'm happy with that placement, so I'm ready to exit place mode. So I can either hit Enter on my keyboard, I could double click, or I could click this check mark up here, or what it was down here in the my contextual taskbar to say that I'm done placing. And you do have to tell that you're done placing, otherwise other tools won't work. And I knew I was in place mode because I had a blue X going through my image. Now immediately we have the problem of I can't see my figure anymore. And so this is another one of those kind of key concepts in Photoshop is I have something called layers. And a layer is just a visual stack of my stuff. So like I have my figure and I have my background. And since my background is above my figure, I can't see my figure. So let's go ahead and click and drag up on this figure. When I'm dragging, I am not going to click on the eyeball. I am not going to click on this chain link. And I am not going to click on this layer mask. I can click on this layer preview or this area to the right of my layer mask. Either spot will work, and I will drag up until a blue line appears above that other layer, and then I will release to have that placed up in that area. All right, now something that will make this next step a little bit easier is if we zoom out a little bit. So I'm going to hit Command or Control minus on my keyboard a couple of times. So I've got plenty of workspace around this. And what I want to do is I want to reveal more of that image I initially placed. To do that, I'm going to come over to the left and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tools down and pick up the crop tool. Similarly, on my keyboard, I could simply hit C for crop tool. Crop tool is going to give me another one of these kind of control boxes. It will behave a lot like the free transform control box we saw when we were placing, but instead of stretching or compressing the image, it will reveal. And so I'm going to click and drag and reveal over. Unlike that other one, it's not going to snap to this edge. So I'm just going to bring it close to that edge, but in a little bit. And I'll bring it close to this edge and in a little bit. I don't want to go past because otherwise I end up with this kind of ugly white line. And when you're done, you'll double click or click the check mark up here or click done down here. Any of those will work for what we're doing. Now our figure would look a lot better if he was over here to the left. So if I want to move something in Photoshop, I'll use the Move tool. And that is the very first tool up here in the top left. The hotkey is worth learning. In this case, it is V for Move tool. Notice that these little blue boxes are telling me what I have active or what I can move around. If yours aren't here, you can turn them on and off by turning on Show Transform Controls. So whichever way you like, you can have it turned on and off. When I'm doing my own work, I generally have them off just because they kind of get in my way visually. Anyway, so I'll turn them on. and I'm going to click and drag on my figure to the left. Notice I get those snap lines, and I want that snap line along the bottom. And I want to drag over to the left until I see a snap line on the left, and then I will release. And he is now excellently placed. So in a lot of these lessons, I'm going to kind of demonstrate while we're going through it, also kind of some good basic design and graphic design rules. So like notice how he is now partially framed by the background, helping draw accessing his face. Notice how this kind of figure points over to where we're going to be putting in our text. And we now have this nice empty place to put our text. Oops. So these kind of things will be good design. Similarly, I haven't clipped his hand or put it too close to the edge, although it's getting a little close right there. So this is good placement. And then finally, we've got this lady running away from this vandal or goth over here. And like it kind of funny, like she's going to rub his belly or something. So next we want to add our text. To add our text, I can hit T for text tool on my keyboard, or I can click on the T over here in my toolbar. Up at the top, I want to set a couple of things for my text. So I am going to go ahead and set it to Arial Black. So if this isn't already Arial Black, just click and start typing in Arial. And we have Arial Black Regular, or some variant thereof. Where it says size, I'm going to type in 300. And then pretty frustratingly, this is one of the only spots in Photoshop where you have to do this. You need to hit enter. And then for my color, I want it to be white. So if this box right here is not white, mine is already, I'm going to click on this box and I will click and drag up to the top left to get a nice pure white. I know I've got a pure white if these numbers look like this. So RGB 255, FFFFFF, 00100, and so on. We'll go over more of these later in a kind of a tedious technical chapter. And we'll click OK. Then I will reset my size back to 300, please. And I'm just going to click. And I'm not going to click and drag. I'm just going to click. A lot of tools in Photoshop will do two different things versus if you click or if you click and drag. So for the text tool, just click and it will give you a text that you can change to whatever you want, rather than an area that you can fit your text into. Most of the time you'll want to click rather than click and drag. We get this default text in here called lorem ipsum, which is Latin gibberish used as a visual placeholder for graphic designers. If you have a mean Latin teacher, I remember you, Miss Harvey, she will hand you a paragraph of this and ask you to translate it. But it's gibberish, and you'll watch Latin 4 kind of lose its mind trying to figure out how to translate it. Anyway, go ahead and type in O Monday again. And if yours reset its size, go ahead and just select this text like you would in any sort of text editor and go ahead and type in 300 again. Like the text tool can be a little goofy with resetting sizing. I don't really like that placement, so I'm going to come up to the top left and I am going to click on the move tool. Or if I wanted to use the hotkey, I would need to exit that I'm typing, so I'd have to click the little check mark right here, and then I could hit V for the hotkey. I'll click on my text and I will drag it right about here, I say. And that looks pretty good. Now I want to save this, and so I'll just go up to File, and I will go to Save. In my case, it reset my Creative Cloud thing when I reset my preferences, it kept that preference. But if you get some warning about Creative Cloud, click the button on there that says on my computer, and if there's a little check mark box that says don't show again, click don't show that again, so you don't have to kind of fight the Creative Cloud save thing over and over again. For the file name, go ahead and give it something descriptive, so like done or oh Mondays, or something that's going to be easy for you to know that this is the finished version of it. The default save version will be a .psd. Make sure to leave that on here. When we get to lesson 3, we'll talk a little bit more about file formats, but it is important that you leave this here. And where it says format down here, it should say Photoshop, and it should do that by default. Then you would click save. In my case, I'm going to throw this on my desktop. If you get this option, go ahead and say don't show again and click OK. And you have now saved your PSD and you're ready to close your file. And to close my file, I could go to File Close, or I could simply click the little box right here to say that I'm done and I have closed my file. All right, let's review two of the key concepts, layers and masks, from this chapter. So an easy way to think about layers in Photoshop is to think about old Scooby-Doo cartoons. We've all seen like Shag and Scoob walking down a hallway, the background kind of moves, they seem kind of offset from it, They come up to a door and you can tell they're about to open the door because it looks a little bit different in color. They go outside and maybe there's a color shift, like they're all blue or whatever. And so when you're thinking about Photoshop, you can think about Scooby-Doo, because Scooby-Doo would be painted on little clear pieces of plastic with a base layer background. So like this smiling figure right here, you could think of as Shag and Scoob, and we can see he's on a clear layer. And same thing with like the rest of the backgrounds. Like we have this little darkening effect. We have our, where is he? We have our cloud effect, and we also have our sun effect. Finally, we have our background, which all those clear pieces of plastic sit on top of. So like when we cut out the background from our figure, we basically made a layer like this that we could then put over our destruction image that looks like this. And for animation, what they would do is they could move this background back and forth while taking pictures of the scene on their board. And they would make different paintings of the character, maybe doing kind of little hopping motions through there in order to create that illusion of effect. And then if they're going to interact with something that wasn't necessarily them, that might actually end up being on a separate layer, or if they wanted to move things separately. So like if you wanted to move the background, you'd move it over a little bit. And to create the illusion of three-dimensionality, you'd move the clouds a little bit less, but you would move the figure quite a bit. And that kind of offsetting would create the illusion of animation or movement pretty effectively. So again, when you're thinking about Photoshop, think about Scooby-Doo, think about Shag and Scoob, and think about those backgrounds. And think about like this kind of gray layer we've got right here, maybe being a semi-clear piece of plastic that they could lay over something in order to darken it or tint it another color. And we'll get to those kind of adjustment layers later in later lessons. All right, so also with layers is this idea of layer masks, where I can say I don't want to have all of a layer visible, or I don't want that layer interact with all the ones underneath it, or I only want part of it to interact with the ones underneath it. And an easy way to think about this is old darkroom photography. So in old darkroom photography up here, I'd have like a negative, an image inverted. In this case, I've left it uninverted, so it's easier for us to see. And say that I wanted to change out the sky on this one, or the foreground. I would mask out part of this image, and I would shine it down onto a piece of photosensitive paper. And wherever that light hit, an image would be cast, and an image would be placed onto that photosensitive paper that I could then develop. And in order to block off that light, I could create a little mask to lay over it to block that off. And then I would put in the new image, and I would take off the top section and lay it down and then put in the new ground. So like if I'm over here in this part of the demo, we can see that I have my combined image right here. And if I turn this stuff off, we can see here's the original image. I've added a mask to it, so I only have the sky, and I wanted to add the ground, so I can click here to add in my ground. And these little black and white sections we can think of as the paper that the photographer would have used to block off light from his photosensitive paper. Now in like real darkroom stuff, they would have that paper on there, and they might wiggle it around a little bit, and they'd hold it off from the side a little bit to kind of help soften up that edge. Or they might just actually chop up their negative, but this is an easy way to think about it. Also, a little frustratingly, if you try to look this up, masking in the darkroom photography is a technique for creating more sharpness in your image. So making a composite in the darkroom, they don't call it masking, which is a little frustrating.